Hello, my name is Ashley Stead, and today I'm going to talk about enhancing transitions with Universal Design for Learning, or UDL. This is a UDT reflection video for my UDL class this past semester. In this video, I will be defining and discussing Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, and its principles, as well as Universal Design for Transition, or UDT. We're going to discuss the importance of UDL strategies for creating inclusive learning environments, and we will also be discussing how UDL is connected in the transition process and how it helps support student success after graduation. I will be providing examples of UDT using UDL concepts, particularly using my unit plan that I developed and created over this past semester for this UDL class. I will discuss briefly how to teach UDL and UDT during professional development for educators, and I have also included some resources and tools for UDL implementation. So what exactly is UDL and UDT? This past semester, we learned that UDL is defined as a framework to improve and optimize teaching and learning for all people based on scientific insights into how humans learn. It focuses particularly on the brain and the what, why, and how we learn new information and how our brain stores that information. It is based on 3 principles with 9 guidelines. The 3 principles are as follow: multiple means of engagement, with guidelines of recruiting interest, sustaining effort and persistence, and self-regulation. There's also multiple means of representation, so looking at perception, language and symbols, and comprehension, and multiple means of action and expression, so physical action, expression, communication, executive functions. It's also important to note that UDL is a framework, not a method or ideology. So just to give you a little background on how UDL and UDT came to be, we look back at the history. So UDT is connected and supported by the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, and legally follows the following regulation. It is important to know that transition plans must begin at age 14. Schools must work alongside those providing job training to smooth transitions for students with disabilities, and transition plans must have measurable goals as well as a plan to assist students in reaching those goals. So very similar to how IEP goals must be measurable and appropriate, this goes along with transition plans as well. The transition plan is made up of a team that consists of the IEP team, the student, their parents, and optional individuals such as employees and college representatives. The team will discuss the following: the student's vision for life after graduation, discuss the student's capability for not only academics but functional areas, age-appropriate goals, build on the student's strengths and identify modifications and accommodations that the student may need to fulfill their job or further education or independent living successfully, and to define everyone's job during this transition plan and give them start and end dates. So most importantly, to define UDL and why UDL works for everyone is UDL works to accommodate the needs and abilities of all learners and eliminates unnecessary hurdles in the learning process. It improves the learning experience for all regardless of disabilities. So it's important to know that UDL, and when discussing and using UDL in the classroom, that you are not just using accommodations and modifications for your individuals with disabilities or for our students that may learn differently, but UDL framework works for anybody regardless of their capability. This includes your exceptional learners, your general education students, your ELL learners, and your students with disabilities. So how exactly do UDL and UDT work together? By using UDL principles while creating a transitional plan for students, each transition plan can be designed on an individual basis, allowing for the student's success. When using these strategies together, the transition team can build a plan that is built and supports the student's personal goals outside of the classroom, focusing on higher education, employment, and independent living. They provide resources to support student success, including personnel and supports in the community, employment, education, housing, and society. So teaching those students to be aware of community individuals such as police with employment. So you have your DARS and HR department, education such as the Dean of Students, and knowing where to go for housing, such as talking to a landlord. So they create goals and supports that can be applied to the curriculum and students' IEP, that can be worked on and mastered within school and at home, including skills needed for success in employment, education, and independent living. And they provide students with accommodations and modifications that allow the student to be successful. And it also teaches them those self-advocacy skills. We are well aware that once the student graduates, the IEP is no longer legally binding. So we have to make sure those students have those advocacy skills. So, to provide an example of how UDL and UDT work together in a unit plan, I will be discussing the unit plan that I created and developed for this course this past semester. So, I particularly looked at family life education in Virginia, looking at the standard 10.4 of the student will use the steps in the decision making progress to solve specific problems. As you can see in the descriptive statement, it includes going over the 6 steps, which are identifying the problem, listing all possible alternatives, evaluating the alternatives and their consequences based on personal and familial beliefs, as well as societal values, choosing an alternative that promotes the good in oneself, others, and society, acting on the decision, and evaluating the results. So they also go into detail about how to relate to personal, social, and peer pressure, and also social media. So the way that I broke up my unit plan was into 3 separate lessons with a final project at the end. When looking at UDL and UDT elements, I made sure that there were multiple means of engagement, representation, and action and expression by allowing different accommodations and modifications, such as having subtitles on the videos, descriptive statements for students that may need it, preferred seating, different ways to answer questions, whether it be with collaboration with peers or writing in their journal or completing a Google Doc in classroom. I also made sure that there were multiple examples for students that may have not necessarily had these personal experiences, as well as different ways that they could perform their final project, which we'll get into on the next slide. So for UDT elements with the first lesson, I made sure that with education, students were able to correctly identify where the problem fell under when it came to the grouping so that they would know who they needed to talk to, whether it was the dean of students, campus of police, in case they needed that extra support. It still continues with employment in the same aspect where they're able to address the seriousness of situations and get help from individuals that may be able to support them, and with independent living as well. So with the second lesson in particular, because the elements were so needed in a 6-step process, I thought it was best to separate the 6 steps into 2 equal parts. So we focused mainly on the first 3 steps of the decision-making process to give that extra support for students that may need it. And as I stated earlier, the UDL elements were still available for those students, as well as how they wanted to express their understanding of the material. So the third lesson was very similar to the first 2, where we had those UDL and UDT elements throughout the entire process of the lesson. The final project is where we see more freedom for the students to be able to identify exactly how they want to represent their understanding of the material. So I provided students with the challenge of solving a problem within their community that was personally important to them. However, if those students were unable to go within the community based on transportation needs or physical needs, or it being too many elements in one, examples were provided that would meet their personal passions, as well as the ability to solve a problem within their own personal life. So if there was a situation going on in a class or at home, they would be able to identify how they followed those 6 steps and then report on them. The students were given different ways of reporting the final project, so they were either able to record, provide a slideshow, actually problem solve something in the community and show the results of that. And with the UDT elements, this is where we really get in depth of the students being able to go through that 6-step process of problem solving using the 6 steps of the decision-making process and being able to solve problems in real life when it came to higher education, employment, or even an independent living for everyday life. So, as we have seen, it's really important to teach UDL and UDT and use these strategies in the classroom. But how exactly do we teach this to educators? Looking at professional development, there's a couple different ways that we can do this, but there's a lot of important things to consider when looking at professional development for UDL and UDT. It's important to know that this was a 16-week course at my college. So we're looking at, the length of time for professional development. Can this be done in an 8-hour period, or does it need to be lengthened out to a end of school day course within 8 weeks of the school year? Also, looking at making sure to provide notes and resources to the educators, having people participate through icebreakers and personal connections, since we know that everybody learns differently and what works best for everyone as a student. Making sure that we have those trained individuals teach this course because there are so many concepts, address the seriousness and importance of using UDL and UDT in classrooms, and stress that UDL and UDT is not just for individuals with disabilities, but this is for every type of student. And finally, I have just provided some resources and tools for UDL and UDT that if you aren't able to have professional development right away, that you can do your own research for. So there are a few different resources that I've hyperlinked here that are really good that go into depth of UDL and UDT and how to use it in your classroom every day. I also made sure to include the book that we used this past semester in my course. It was really helpful and went into real depth of the understanding of UDL and UDT and how we use all these components together to make sure that our students are successful, not only in the classroom, but once they graduate and go on to live daily lives. I would like to thank you for taking your time of watching this video and going through what we have learned this past year and understanding how important UDL and UDT really is, especially with our students as educators. And I would like to stress how much I have learned this past semester and how better prepared I feel as an educator and understanding that I can meet the needs of all of my students, regardless of disability and ability, in my classroom, which is really important, especially as we know of making sure that our students with disabilities are included. Thank you very much.